Hi, here we are. I'm Meg. I'm better known as Lamplight on my Insta and my business. And I'm here with...
I'm Aaron. I am referred to as Aaron or Aaron or whatever else you want to vary it with.
Do people say that?
Aaron? Oh, yeah.
I love that.
You got to watch it. It's a skit from Key and Peele, Angry Substitute Teacher. It's brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll put it in the show notes, as we always say. Yeah, and I'm a dietitian and a certified body trust provider.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm not, but I hope to be one day. I'm Shira Rosenbluth, and I am a therapist in New York City, and I also have a blog where I talk about recovery, eating disorders, fashion, inclusive fashion, and all that kind of stuff.
Let's pause to give ourselves a hand.
Yeah.
Woohoo! I'm holding my phone, sorry.
We are here because we separately and together we're having a conversation about the things we've encountered in our own work with clients and our own work with our own healing through eating disorder and disordered eating. And we have some pretty specific thoughts about that. And we thought we'd record it. And today we're talking about recovery. Hooray.
Yeah.
Love that. But one thing I was thinking about when I was walking along today was food words that caused me stress when I was sick. And I thought we'd play word association if we could.
Yeah.
I guess this would be like orthorexic word association.
Are we starting with kale and chia?
Kale.
Yeah.
Green. Sorry.
It's not a chip.
That's not a word.
I don't care. You say kale. My answer to kale is it's not a chip.
It's not a chip.
Sadness.
It's like shit. It's mine.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say. I don't know. There's so many words that I want to come in to say, but I'd say one of the scariest ones is hunger.
Oh, jacked up.
Yeah.
That's 2 words.
It's all right.
What was it? Jack up?
No, hunger, and then jacked up.
Jacked up was my response.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Insatiable.
Interesting. What's yours, Aaron?
To go along with hunger.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to say 2. It is necessary and scary.
It's interesting, I think. Can we talk about those responses really fast?
Yeah.
Necessary and scary.
Well, I think, I think of like hunger as like one of those things that is, I mean, like in not just food wise, but like in a metaphorical sense, like we need to hunger for things. And I think, being hungry for food is like sort of a necessary part of this journey for a lot of us because we haven't listened to it. And I think, but also it's like the hunger for things outside of food and life and where do we find that, that energy that we've like channeled into our eating disorder and funnel it into other things that is also going to help us like hunger in a good way, like in a necessary way for a meaningful life. And all of that's scary. I think the actual physical feeling of hunger for a lot of folks is incredibly scary. And then the idea that like I'm allowed to be hungry, like to hunger for like a want, right, is scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel both of those things completely. And Shira, what was yours?
Oh, I was just doing I was taking word association very literally. So I was just, I think what was it, to hunger?
Uh-huh.
I mean, I said insatiable. And I would also say scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is the insatiability scary for you?
Yeah. And I think obviously the more that I would respond to my hunger appropriately, the less insatiable I'd feel and the more normal, for lack of a better word, I'd feel around my hunger and food. But then when you're stuck in the restrict cycle, it kind of makes it feel like relentless, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And I think my jacked up is that even with years of recovery under my belt, and this is actually probably a pretty good segue to get into the idea of recovery, it still feels hard for me sometimes to respond to my hunger. It still feels hard for me to feel my hunger, and it never doesn't feel weird to give into it. If that makes sense. And thinking about those things and feeling these feelings that I have, as I consider myself a pretty healed and recovered person, I still have behaviors and I still have thoughts and I still have things that will always be part of who I am as a person that were connected to being sick. And I think that's normal. And I also think that the idea that we will get to this magical place where none of these things ever happen again is shit and bullshit. And I think it's super problematic that we're attaching recovery, that we tend to attach recovery to this perfect idea of absolute, non-negotiable, we're there entirely, everything will be great. It's almost as if recovery has its own culture like diet culture that isn't attainable for most of us. And that's what I really want to talk about.
Yeah.
What did you mean when you said weird, that sometimes it still feels weird to listen to it?
Wrong.
Okay.
Almost like, you spend so many years either trying to ignore it or ignoring it or getting really good at feeling hungry. Like it feels right to feel empty and light and hungry, which is what my body still remembers as a good thing and as a preferred thing. So I've worked pretty hard to ignore that behavior, but at the same time, it feels wrong sometimes to ignore that behavior because my brain likes to go there, especially if I'm insecure or having a hard time or really tired or hormonal. It comes up a lot more often.
I really appreciate you normalizing that. I think I was just recently telling somebody that I hate feeling wrong. Like every time I eat, I feel like I'm doing something wrong and I hate that feeling. And she kind of said what you said. You do it anyway, even if it feels wrong. But I appreciate you saying that even though you're in a place where you feel a lot more healed, you still kind of feel that way. And it feels, I don't know, it makes me feel better to hear that.
Yeah, it's normal. I mean, it really is to think that it just suddenly goes away because you've done a lot of work. The work is important, the work is necessary, and the work will save our lives. But it doesn't make it automatically easy or always or there, I don't know. And I think that I expected to get to a place that was done. Like I'm done. I'm just great now. I'm gonna, go do this, go do that. And I can go do those things, but they require sometimes some thought, some work, some tears still. Yeah.
I think that's a narrative that just we don't hear often enough. I mean, I think just thinking about so much, like you just hear that like people are going to get like the narrative is that you're going to get better and that you're going to like, once you're better, you sort of don't go back. Right. And it's like everything's going to be fixed. And it's just not how it works out for nearly everyone. So it's
Right.
like, it's almost like we're setting this expectation of what it means to be like in recovery or recovered or whatever bullshit word we're using. It does feel a little bit like diet culture, a little bit, it does feel like this is what you got to work really hard for this, but like sometimes we have a really hard time of identifying what this actually is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think if we did a better job of naming that for people, I think that would, just like Shira just said, I think that would normalize so much for folks.
Right.
And I think also we live in a world, obviously, that is so obsessed with body image and bodies and dieting. And then we expect people with eating disorders to be healed and better than the rest of the population. And that's a really hard place to be. To say that you're never going to struggle with body image issues just feels so unrealistic and unattainable. And I think sometimes I read those definitions of what professionals in the field have said, what the definition of recovered is. And it's like to not have preoccupation with your body. I mean, the whole population does. Why? It doesn't seem realistic at all to me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that when I was doing my certified body trust provider training, I remember Dana specifically saying that, oh yeah, she still had bad body days. And I was like, oh, what? But like you said, Shira and Aaron, it normalizes it to hear people who make their lives doing this work, and it still is part of us. And I think that's important to know and important to pass on.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it doesn't mean that our lives can't be full and meaningful and amazing in a lot of ways. We can still have good lives and also have struggle. That's just part of life. That's part of living.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And learning how to kind of come back from a dip into behaviors or a bad patch, or even a couple days. Like I don't know about y'all, but I can kind of start slippery sloping and not realize that I'm doing it for maybe a couple days, and then like, oh gosh, I've really been restricting, and so it's like it's going to happen, and I get that, but I also have ways to sort of understand that and maybe not beat myself up about it, ideally, and kind of climb out of it and just be chill again for a bit, you know. And I think part of that thing is being compassionate with ourselves and being kind to ourselves through that process.
Yeah. I think, you know, the thing that I think about in hearing that, Meg, is also the community aspect of like how that helps us. And, you know, I feel like, you know, I tell this to everyone I talk to, but like every time I think about the importance to me of the body trust work is, yes, I mean, there's like fundamentals and there's theories and there's things that like I've internalized, but I think along with it is the community. Like I can't say enough positive things about having a really strong community around us. And I think that's also just like what I see lacking in how people, you know, go to treatment and leave treatment, is like there's efforts to build community, but I don't know what really solidifies for folks. And I feel like if we were to really tackle that in a meaningful way, I'd be curious to see how that helps people heal.
Yeah, I did not go to residential treatment, and I'm very curious about it. And my decisions were mine. And if I question it sometimes. I might have benefited greatly from it. So I don't have a personal experience with it, just from clients. But y'all have more experience in it than I do. And from what I understand, you can tell me yes or no in your experience, there's a lot of isolation, even in residential. And there's a lot of, talk to me about that first.
It's interesting that you're saying that because in a lot of residential treatments, one of the rules is that you can't use your phone and you can't use your computer, and you have like 10 minutes or 15 minutes a day to talk to your family or something. And their whole idea is that you need to be able to like immerse yourself into treatment and really focus and not be distracted. The thing is, treatment is time limited. And if you don't learn how to integrate back into your life and connect and, like you said, build a community outside of treatment, I find that to be incredibly problematic. I think it's so important to be able to reach out and connect and talk to people outside of treatment when you're in treatment, because like I said, yeah, treatment is so time limited. You're there for a few weeks or a few months, depending on insurance and finances, and then you're back in the real world. And if you didn't create some sort of community, it is incredibly isolating and very jarring, like the transition.
Yeah. And you know, from the I've never, as a client, I was never in treatment, and I've only seen it from the provider perspective. And I would agree a lot with what Shira says. You know, you know, I understand the reason residential treatments are there, and they're helpful for a lot of folks. But I also see like they're the 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 con for the individual going through it, right? What that being cut off can do in a negative way for someone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and yes, I mean, you know, depending on the group, you can see individuals build, you know, some relationships in treatment, but it's sort of like summer camp. You know, once treatment's over, everyone goes back to where they come from, right? And so it's not like that that bond sort of stays in a meaningful way once everyone is sort of out of this sort of very intense experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was my experience, where you create these like intense relationships with people and you love them and you think you're going to be in touch with them for the rest of your life. And the second you leave, you go back to your place, they go back to theirs. And it's very common just to not keep in touch once that happens.
Do you find that people are having this conversation in your worlds about the ideas of recovery, about feeling stressed out to manage recovery, not only in the, you know, relapsing, but also in the ideas of it?
I mean, I'll say for me, yes. I mean, I feel like the treatment center I work at, although not perfect, is trying, and you know, my role in that is actually to sort of start facilitating some of these conversations with folks. So the fact that they have even thought like, hey, we need a paid employee to actually like be a part of changing the culture from within.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it is hopeful, but you know, it's also it's easier than, it's not as easy as just saying, oh, let's just have the discussions, right? I mean, there's a lot of systems in place that need to be looked at, and so, you know, I think from my perspective, yes, there are like some places that are starting to think about this question. I would say friend wise, and again, I'm in a bubble of like either body trust providers or folks like Shira who like probably will soon be body trust providers down the road, right? Is yeah, we're always, I feel like this question is always coming up. Like, what are we going to do better? Like what, how are we going to do this differently? And like, think about this word recovery.
Yeah.
So, but again, I feel like I'm sort of in a very isolated bubble. I don't know if it's happening outside of that sort of fringy type work where a lot of us live.
I think it's still very radical. Oh, that's all I was going to say, is that I still think it's just a very radical approach to recovery, and for the rest of the world, they still view it kind of like how you described it in the beginning, this like unrealistic, perfect standard.
Yeah. And I work with people who are starting this work and aren't really connected to body trust provider or, you know, any other facet of this space other than wanting to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And their idea of what recovery is and can be is pretty perfectionist based, and it's scary. It's super scary, and I love being able to address that a little bit. And I love being able to talk to my own story of, oh no, I still feel these things. It's important for me to talk about, and it's important for people to hear, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think as a provider, the fact that you can say those things openly is so important, because sometimes we're put onto this unrealistic, or like the standard where we're supposed to be the perfectly healed people healing everyone else. And that's just not how life works. No.
And in fact, I don't know about y'all, but I don't want to go see somebody who won't even talk about their own shit. And I know there's certain levels of, what do I want to say? I am not a therapist or a psychotherapist or psychiatrist. I'm a certified body trust provider and a nutritionist. And I think my levels of openness are a little bit more wide than, say, a medical person. It seems like on treatment teams, I'm the person who talks the most about my own shit and kind of trade stories with my clients where their therapist and their RD can't really be that forthcoming about it, or don't feel comfortable being that forthcoming about it. So it's actually great for me to be that person for the client. I don't know how y'all work with clients in that way, if you talk about your own shit, basically.
I mean, I think it's important to be human in the room. And if you're not human, then what are you doing? I don't spend a lot of time talking about myself, only because I can relate to my clients and validate their experiences without necessarily needing to share my personal stuff. But that isn't to say that if a situation calls for it, that I'm not black and white about it, but usually the focus is on my clients, but I don't necessarily need to share my personal issues, because I feel like my clients can get a sense that I get where they're coming from and get what's going on without needing to be specific, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And I think so similar to Shira, like I feel like I want to be human in the room, you know, and I don't want to be like a cardboard cutout, just like
Can't even imagine that.
me either. Like and like it's sort of like my when I first started, I sort of felt that that's what I had to do on some level, and it didn't feel right. And I feel like the clients that I have now want that from me. Like they want that interaction from me. They want to work with me because I'm gonna be a human, right, and validate, you know, lived experiences and share that I'm a human also, right, and that this is not just a one-sided discussion, right? This is something we can all add to it, you know.
And I think, you know, go ahead.
No. If I was going to work with a therapist who just parroted back, and how does that make you feel? And why are you asking me that? What's really behind that? I would stab myself in the eyeballs and run the hell away and never come back. Like, I need a human in the room when I'm talking to somebody, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody who can cry with you if they want to, and emote and feel the feels too. I think for me, that's important. And we've all been on podcasts. We've all been on Christy's podcast, Food Psych. And I think part of the reason, I know, right? Part of the reason that our episodes resonated with people is that we got to tell our story. All of our stories are very different, but all of our stories are so personal and so fraught, you know, in so many different ways, that I think that when people can hear somebody being honest about some shit that they went through, and they might still go through a little bit, I think that that's really powerful.
I agree. And I think that's actually one of the things that I think makes her podcast so popular and so good, is that everyone who comes on, you sort of need to talk about yourself a little bit, right? And talk about your own, like that's her first question. You know, like, what's your history with food? And I think that's really important for people to hear, you know, because it's, I don't know. I know I can think of barely a few people who, you know, were lucky enough to sort of be nurtured in a way around food where they don't have many food issues, right? Like those people are anomalies to me, you know, and so we're all gonna have it. Like it's just, if you grew up in this culture, you know, the chances are very high you've been subjugated to some diet culture and body image influence.
And same goes with recovery too.
Yeah.
Sort of like, here's what you do, here's how you do it, and there's not really a chance to explore that might be different for different people.
Yeah.
And even the recovery stories that we do see, I don't know if you want to even go here, but it's the thin white woman recovering in her thin white body. And there is no other story, which is so unrealistic given what we all know about the reality of who struggles with an eating disorder, that it's not just the thin white woman.
I love that you brought that up, and that's so fucking true. Absolutely. And it's like if you were to believe the stories, I'm not saying that can't happen. I don't know anybody. I have to say, I don't know anybody for whom that's happened, whether they're thin and white or not. It's just harder than that. And if they're saying it's not harder than that, it's probably not necessarily true.
Yeah.
I love that they saw the light and
Yeah.
everything clicked. It was that in that moment that was their
Yeah.
major turning point. And I'm just like, really? Or I recovered so anyone can. That's my favorite.
I
That makes me
hate
wanna
that
punch
so
somebody.
much. I hate that. And that's one of the things that started me on this. It's like, oh, if I can do this, you can too. And honestly, I said that.
Oh,
I
I said
totally
that.
said that.
That's how I became a dietitian. I thought
Yeah.
if I could do this, everyone can. No, so totally like hand up, did harm.
When you said that, were you still sick? Because I totally was
Oh,
still sick when
totally.
I said
Yeah.
that.
I mean, this is when I was back in school and I was like, totally like eating the same lunch every day. And,
Yeah.
you know, and it wasn't like active dieting. It was just like, just what people would call like maintenance, right? So, but
Yeah,
it was
the
super
safe foods.
restrictive, right?
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But it was super regimented and super strict. Yes, no, I was totally in it,
Yeah.
you know, and it, you know, even today, like I just, you know, when Shira says it, like it hurts that I said that, you know, but like that's the honest part is that I did say it, like I was totally there,
Yeah.
you know, and so like, so here's one thing where this might bridge some of those gaps is like I think this evolution into this work, like the paradigms that I use now and that we all sort of resonate with has taken time. Like I started from a place that was not willing to probably hear a lot of this, you know, but here I am speaking about it and having it be very true and resonate deeply with me in a way that nothing else has before. And I think that's the interesting part. Like, I think to me, it's the evolution story, right? That is to me so interesting.
Yes, and that word is so great, evolution, because it doesn't imply that there's this finality, that there's this end point.
Yeah.
It just applies that we all, it's like our bodies, we all fucking change. It's like in my group, I have a group called Elder Queer, and part of that, the power of that group is just sort of accepting that we're changing, we're dying, you know, our bodies are getting older and systems are going to work differently, and that's intentional. It's like there's no intention of learning this one way of doing things in terms of refeeding or relearning or reclaiming. There's no end point to that. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record at this point.
No, I'm here for it.
There's just no, it's just going to be you're changing. So things are going to change and your brain's going to change and it's going to hold on to the things that make it feel safe in that changing way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. The idea of that so many people I know who are doing this kind of work started doing this work while being sick. Like do what I say and not as I do kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm counseling people in anti-diet stuff at the very beginning and having groups of people in my house and saying these things, but not meaning them for me because they didn't apply to me. I don't know if it was a deserving thing or if it was a higher morality thing, like, oh, I don't need to listen to these people need me more than I need, you know, whatever it is that prevents us from thinking we deserve that too, deserve that kind of freedom that we're talking about.
Yeah.
The rules are always different when it comes to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Always. You know?
Yeah. Very true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also a lot more emotional. There's a lot more at stake.
When you apply to yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because you're admitting that you've been wrong or that you didn't achieve something. And a lot of this is perfectionism based anyway, disordered thinking, disordered eating disorders. So that, you know, when you're challenging yourself into understanding that you don't have all the answers and this isn't maybe the right way, that is really fucking tricky. Yeah. And that you may not ever know what the right way is, because there is no right way. But
right.
when you admit that you don't have the answer, that's really scary, and that applies to the recovery thing too. Mm-hmm. How do we tell people about that?
So I was just going to say, like, I think what if that is like the slogan, right, of somewhere, like we don't have the answers, right? Like come work with me, and honestly, I don't know all the
I
answers.
have no clue. Come work with me.
But like
I don't
we're
know.
gonna find them out together. But like I'm the partner that you want to help figure them out, right? Because like what you know, in a sort of individual sense, but in a broader sense, is, you know, I tell my clients individually all the time, like I have the answers for me. Like your answers are going to be your answers, and we're going to find them out. But like I can't give you mine because they work for me. Right. Like, and so like, what if treatment were to embrace that idea that like, you know, this is your recovery. Here are a bunch of things that we think might help, but you need to make it yours, not ours, right? I wonder how that would change.
Just a lot more curiosity and openness. I think the professionals that come in and say they have all the answers and they can fix you are the ones that you need to run from, because
head for Z Hills.
What?
Yeah. Head for Z Hills, like run. Yeah.
Has that happened to you, Shira, with providers saying that they had all the answers?
Or like this is, you know, they would tell me what to do, and then this would, I mean, I got solutions that were kind of terrifying for eating disorder recovery, but that was what they believed would fix me. 20 years later, here we are, you know.
Right. And, you know, that's normal too. I think relapse is completely normal. And I don't know, we fear it. We fear it as being like the ultimate failure. But I think it happens quite a bit. And it's kind of, again, for me, it's happened to me. It's learning how to treat yourself well during that time, and understanding that you'll get on the other side of it again. Maybe it'll take you shorter this time. Yay. But I don't know. Yeah. Relapse is normal.
I think we need to normalize that in the professional world too, because so many people are struggling silently, but won't talk about it because of the fear of what that will do to their career, or like how people will judge them. And it's kind of a shame because we can't help our own in the way that they deserve.
Right. That's such a good point.
Well, and that just speaks to, Shira, just your bravery in sharing your story, right? In not just on your own blog, but like on podcasts, and being open about that. Is that like, I think, you know, you're in many sense, you're a leader in that way. And what we need, I watched this video recently about the first follower. Have you ever heard of this? Right. The person who sort of stands up and like is dancing alone, right? They're like this leader, right? But the almost the bravest person is the first follower, who sort of says, this is I'm going to join this person. Like, I'm actually going to make myself exposed also. Right. And when after the first follower, other people are like, oh, I can do this also. And like the third and fourth and fifth, but it's that first follower that really needs to build some momentum. And so, Shira, you laid the groundwork to like, for this, and what we're hoping for is for the first follower now.
Thank
right.
you.
But your bravery is really important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think your story on food psych, and there may have been other podcasts where you've told this particular story, but it really affected me. And it made me think about doing this exact thing, as having this conversation, and how important it is for people to hear that not only is it normal, but it's normal to fucking talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's okay to be in practice when you're having these issues. It doesn't make you less of a provider. It doesn't make you less of a person. It just means you're fucking more human.
Yeah.
Right. We're not immune.
Right. Not at all. And this process only makes you stronger, because you're understanding more about what you need, and more about where you can explore new channel. I don't know. I just, it's not ideal to relapse, but it's also a growing experience. Right. But it's also looked at, you can look at it as, okay, here's another opportunity for me to figure out where I need to go with this, and how I need to go with this, and who goes with me, and how do we do it together? Like, speaking to the community thing.
Yeah.
But also, isn't it interesting that it's only about eating disorder recovery that this is even an issue? Like, if there's a provider that has anxiety and struggles with, I don't know, a panic attack, are we going to say they can't practice anymore? Oh my God, throw them out. Like, it doesn't happen in any other area, but it seems like with eating disorders, there's so much more judgment. And
yes. Yeah. Again, with the weakness. Oh, she let herself, oh, they let themselves do this. And it really does seem so judgy. And
I wonder if that weakness would be present if it was a male who relapsed.
oh,
interesting.
You know?
that is interesting.
And
It's the way, yeah.
I don't know. Like it's because like there's so few men who are one sort of getting the care they need, to then clinicians who work with eating disorders, right? I mean, it's like it's a very small number to sort of investigate, but I would be really curious, like, is that the same, does treatment or does the professional world view that relapse the same as someone who's female or identifies as female?
That's super interesting. Or if dudes are even more reticent to talk about relapse than
Totally.
females, AFABs,
Yeah.
women. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really good question. It's so loaded.
Yeah, and I think also it made me think about the fact that, you know, a couple of weeks ago, I think I talked about this on my Instagram, but people were questioning my motives and my intentions and saying that I was speaking about this for attention. And I was just thinking, if I was a guy right now sharing my story, nobody would be like, oh my God, she's doing this for attention. Like,
What does that even mean? What kind of attention are you looking for? It's like, that's such a bullshit.
if I wanted attention, I would have shared my story like 7 years ago when I first launched my blog and put it all out there and built my following on my eating disorder 7 years ago. I kept it a secret for a long time, for years. So, yeah.
That is it. And I think a lot of this might have to also do with that it's about food. And regardless of our healing and how we're told and we learn that we have agency over our hunger and all the things, relapse is still about food, and giving into the relapse about food makes us, you know, lesser than and weak too. It's so, I think our feelings about food and body is so complicated, even in recovery work.
And then even as your body changes, and I guess particularly for me, since it's a little bit more public, then people start saying, oh, are you letting yourself go? Are you swinging to the other side? Like, there's all this judgment and concern and I don't know, things that are just, I just wish we would just let bodies just fucking be, personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's even in this work, it gets tricky. And that's, I guess, why we're here talking about it.
Yeah.
We need to have the conversation. And I'm really grateful to both of you for wanting to go here. I could think about 2,000 topics that I'd want to talk about with you guys.
Maybe this is the first of many episodes.
We call it Providers Roast.
Yes,
yeah. There you go.
Wait, okay, we're starting a 700th podcast because Erin has like 7 of them already.
I have
so
one.
True.
This one.
Gosh. Okay. Well,
that could be a really fun podcast. I'm just saying.
What would we call it?
Providers Roast Dash.
So and that's the word that's going to stick. Providers Roasting.
Yeah, it's fine.
That's very meta.
Let me see your tattoo.
Well, it's all covered, like with this.
We have it on the tape.
Yeah.
It's still really rad.
Yes.
After we hang up, I have many questions for you. So, okay. Or after we're done recording.
Is there anything anybody would like to say? I'll go last, but y'all go first. Anybody who's interested in this topic or may have quick questions, or feel free, throw it out.
I mean, I'll say that I think this is not an insignificant moment, right? To have these conversations. I think we need a lot more people engaging like this, and I think what would be really interesting is how do we sort of broaden these conversations for folks and like, because I think when we start talking is how we really sort of, again, I think it's community, and I think, but then we also like share these ideas, and I think we come up with some things that are not just sort of the standard cookie cutter ways of dealing with this. I think we need some fresh ideas and some new perspectives, because in a lot of ways what we've been doing in the past is not working.
Yeah.
I agree. I think creativity and having an open mind and curiosity instead of judgment and closed-mindedness is definitely what we need.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that making this work somehow accessible to a broader range of people, in all different walks of life, in all different places in recovery. I feel like I just have to do, like the O words. Now I'm the R word. But accessibility is probably our next topic that we can talk about and bring some more folks in, because this is not just for the thin, white, rich, cis folks. This is all of so many of us.
Yeah.
And access is important. And access to this idea that recovery isn't, this one thing for every single person at any one point in their lives and their journey with this shit.
Right.
So thank you. Thanks for this quickie discussion. I could have gone on and on. I'm going to do one more word association. I didn't even have one. Uh-oh. Okay, I'll do the one I started with. Okay, corn.
Corn. I'm gonna say the other thing I said before. Shit.
Fiber.
And I would say GMOs. What was that Netflix whole movie about corn?
Oh,
it was such bullshit. Yeah, whatever it was so scary to me. And I was like, oh, every client, you better watch this, because the non-organic corn is blowing into the organic corn, and just don't eat corn.
I will never watch it. You couldn't pay me enough money to watch it.
Well, the reason I said shit is not because I don't like corn, is because it shows up in your shit the next day.
I know exactly where you were going.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
I realized that. And honestly, when I was sick, I'd use corn. Anyway, never mind.
Thank you. Enough said.
Okay.
We can talk about that later.
I'm going to turn this off now, and then we can keep talking. Thank you, everybody.